I walked into a glittering gala with my 7-year-old's backpack and found a sealed deed under my seat with my name already signed. "Smile, Mom," my son whispered. "It's just ceremonial." Then the screens lit up with my porch, captioned, "Gift." A woman in emerald breathed, "Cue it when she's smiling." That's when I saw the initials on her card, the alias tied to my power of attorney. If I speak, I lose my son. If I stay quiet, I lose my home. So tonight, I choose the microphone. Amber light pooled across the portside conservatory's marble floors like warm honey, and the glass atrium held the dusk, the way a careful hand holds breath. A jazz quintet feathered the air with brushed cymbals and a trumpet that never raised its voice. I arrived between my daughter, thanks in advance, and my small, serious grandson, Jamie. Velvet seat tags waited in neat rows, each braid looped over chairbacks like tiny sashes. Ours said donor gold, embroidered in thread the color of old coins, with smaller letters beneath, legacy. Silent auction paddles were tucked into programs, name placards danced along round tables. The donor wall scrolled in polite, luminous letters that never ran out of money. I wore the black dress that forgives and a string of freshwater pearls my late husband saved for, each bead an imperfect moon. Thanks, in advance's thrifted blazer, fit like resolve. Jamie's clip-on bow tie aimed bravely at his chin. We were humble among cultivated, glittering people, and I felt welcome the way poor weather feels tolerated by a wedding. Marcus spotted us first, cutting through the foyer with a grin that pretended to be casual and failed. 36 and restless, my son vibrated like the after-ring of the cymbal. Beside him was Rowan Halstead, all emerald silk and curated poise, a woman who collected compliments the way a lake collects sky. She slid toward us like success. "Mom," Marcus said, kissing my cheek, already scanning the room for bigger eyes. "Big announcement tonight." Rowan's smile didn't reach for me. It reached past me. "To a patron," she breathed. "Legacy warms the future. It's the kindest footprint." Then, finally, to me, "You look radiant, Elena." Her hand rested, only a moment, on Jamie's head. A monarch knighting a toy. Radiant was generous. My heart had been wrapped in tissue and stored in a top closet since the minor stroke that made my words stumble once. I recovered, but a part of me stayed on tiptoe. I had signed a broad power of attorney then, so Marcus could steer bills while I learned to breathe without watching for failure. The document lived afterward in a manila folder at the back of a drawer and, somehow, at the front of my mind. Its edges seemed to hum whenever Marcus mentioned partnerships or opportunities. He said it was just a bridge while I healed. Bridges are useful. They are also how you cross water that can carry you away. An usher led us to the center left aisle, a little island of importance. The velvet tags on our chairs were heavier here, tassels fat as grapes. Mine read, "Donor Gold Legacy," the hyphen like a raised eyebrow. I touched it. The thread was slightly rough against my finger, as if letters could scratch meaning into skin. Jamie refused to give up his little backpack, the one with a stitched astronaut floating across stars that always looked like spilled salt. He hugged it to his front even when he Saturday. "You can put it on the floor," I whispered. He shook his head. He knew something about nights and homes that I pretended not to. "If we give them our house, where will my dinosaurs sleep?" he asked, voice a curtain moving in a draft. The question was sand in my shoe. "We are not giving anyone anything tonight," I said, and I believed it because my mouth knew how to make promises faster than my mind knew how to audit them. The program shimmered under the stage lights. Overture, youth scholarships, legacy gifts that change our city, tribute waltz. Change Our City had a trumpet of optimism in it, but legacy sat like a stone. The MC rehearsed into a tiny mic near the wings. Staff in black slid past with trays of sparkling water disguised as celebration. Marcus was electrified. He patted shoulders and laughed 3 decibels higher than usual. When he looked at me, hope and fear passed through his face like strangers changing hats. "Just smile when it's time," he murmured, and the sound landed in me the way a snowflake lands on a river, unmeasured, melting, dangerous in a crowd. Rowan collected compliments, shaping them into a crown she wore lightly. She praised a patron's earrings as if she were returning them to their rightful queen. She tilted so the emerald caught the chandelier, an accidental sermon on prosperity. When strangers asked how we knew one another, she produced my name like a grant application she had already won. On the donor wall, names unspooled in a silver script that loved adding the numeral 2 to sons who were already named after their fathers. Foundations wore surnames like ballrooms wear the smell of wax. Every time Park scrolled past, my own last name looked tiny as a folded napkin. Status hummed like the building's invisible climate. Jamie fidgeted, digging his fingers into the backpack straps. Thanks in advance, 28 and steady, slid a hand over his and held until his breathing matched hers. She has a way of turning panic down like a dimmer. I watched them and felt the tender, ordinary truth of our small family, and also a hairline crack running under the tile. I pretended to check the fine print on the program and, instead, checked the old tremor in my hand. The stroke taught me to listen to tiny weather inside my body. Tonight's barometer read unsettled. The power of attorney document rustled in memory. A page doesn't speak, but it can breathe. I could feel it lifting and lowering somewhere. A soft tug on my sleeve. Jamie hadn't taken his eyes off the stage once, but now he leaned toward me, a conspirator. "Grandma, you didn't look under the seat, did you?" His voice threaded through the bass line like a message tucked into music. I lifted the cushion because sometimes children serve the truth without knowing it. There, snug against the metal support, lay a sealed envelope with my name in a tidy block script, Elena Park. The paper was the expensive kind that thinks it is skin. A tiny red arrow sticker peeked from one corner like a mischievous tongue. I slid it free and felt the swift, private silence that follows a dropped glass. Inside was a pre-filled quitclaim deed, my parcel number typed neatly beside legal lines that marched like a drill team. A yellow sticky note rode the top page. "Stage left, announce the gift during donor tributes." The line for my signature wore the same red arrow as a boutonniere. My house, reduced to a checkbox and a flourish. I breathed through my nose and smelled old ink and fresh lemons from the table polish. A donor at the next row laughed the laugh of someone who has never had to hide $100 in a cookbook. I put the envelope on my lap, palms flat, as if containing a bird that insisted it wasn't trapped. Rowan glided near, inspecting place settings with the bright focus of a surgeon who likes cameras. "Everything to your taste?" She purred to the table, not to me. A man in a tuxedo thanked her for cultivating generosity, and she accepted the praise as though it had been patiently waiting for her, like a car at the curb. I looked again at the sticky note, the arrow, the confidence. A kindness that needs a trapdoor is not a kindness. I heard myself think the sentence in my husband's voice, which made my throat go hot. The quintet started, "Autumn leaves," and the leaves, tonight, were green bills and letters of the alphabet. The velvet tag on my chair pressed against my hip as if to remind me of my part in the evening's choreography. Donor gold, legacy. The words weren't placement, they were prophecy. I pictured myself rising, smiling, surrendering. The building seemed to tilt. Somewhere in the balcony, someone clapped at the wrong time and then stopped. "What announcement?" I asked Marcus when he swung past again, a comet made of handshakes. "You'll see," he said, joy strapped over worry like a rental tuxedo over old shoes. "Tonight we show the city what partnership looks like. I didn't ask who the partners were. I have learned to be quiet long enough for answers to reveal themselves." "Thanks." In advance slid her chair closer until our elbows touched. "You okay?" she murmured. "The water tastes expensive," I said, and the joke let us breathe. She glanced at the envelope, then at me. In her eyes I saw the kitchen light at home, the chipped mug, the promise that ordinary life would be waiting when the glitter washed off. Backstage, the stage manager traced the cue sheet with a pencil like a priest blessing a liturgy. The MC adjusted his cufflinks, lips shaping applause before it existed. Rowan hovered nearby, whispering to a woman with a headset, pointing with the soft authority of someone rehearsed in other people's gratitude. Her eyes kept passing over the left wing. Servers began floating miniature crab cakes on slate trays that looked like roof shingles. A youth ensemble filed in with their instruments, cheeks pink from the cold. In the lobby, a volunteer smoothed a tablecloth until it lay flat as the future. Money whispered everywhere without using the word money. My palms kept finding the envelope as if magnetized. "Can we go home after the songs?" Jamie asked, softer now, as if home might hear and answer. "After the songs," I promised, then immediately wished I had chosen a less measurable promise. He nodded, satisfied by the precision. He is 7. He still believes grown-ups own time. I smiled so he would not see me counting. I set the envelope back on my lap, cool as porcelain, and folded my fingers. That smile they wanted would not arrive on cue, not from me. Instead of bolting, I slid the envelope into my purse and angled closer to "thanks in advance." We blocked the aisle with our knees like a tiny barricade. I opened the flap just enough for her to see the pre-filled deed, the red arrow pointing to my name like a sheriff. Her face cooled from alarm to focus. "Get proof," she whispered. "Proof first. Fury later." I nodded, shoulders squaring, my fear turning into narrow light I could aim. Music loosened the room. I steered us toward the shadowed tech bay behind the left aisle, where a boy with a headset peered into blinking monitors as if they were moral compasses. A name badge read Noah in earnest block letters. He looked 19, acne half-healed, fingers restless on the lightboard. I said, gently, "Noah, could you help with a slide question?" He startled, then leaned in, loyal to duty, eager to be useful. He glanced toward the stage, then toward the emerald streak of Rowan circulating near the wings. "A woman in green told me to cue one titled Elena Park Home Gift," he said, voice lowered to the secret frequency of interns. "She said to cue the slide, when she's smiling." The word smiling roamed the air like a stray. "Thanks." In Advance's grip sharpened on Jamie's shoulder, protective even from across a breath. Noah's screensaver tried to intervene with drifting stars, but he shook the mouse and brought the list back. There it was. Elena Park, Home Gift, Final 2, PPTX, a name that pretended to be humble and final at once. He hovered the cursor, and properties slid open like an unguarded drawer. Author fields waited blankly. The modified time stamped tonight, minutes ago. My stomach understood timestamps before my mind did. From here I could study the choreography Rowan conducted without touching a baton. Her gaze ticked between the MC's cue sheet, the stage manager's clipboard, and Noah's glowing monitor. She never looked directly at us. She looked at outcomes. The emerald silk made a moving landmark in a field of black attire. When she passed a volunteer, the woman straightened as if rehearsed by praise. The tech bay smelled faintly of dust and orange cleaner. Patch cables looped like licorice between boxes labeled DMX and aux, hieroglyphs of light and sound. Through a tiny window I could see the wing where stagehands vanished like house spirits. Noah's fingers lived here. He knew which fader made the room breathe. He set a password on the screen capture, looked at me and said, "I'll keep it safe." "Mrs. Alvarez?" I asked. "I'm Elena Park." Someone placed an envelope under my chair. I set it down, careful as a live wire. She glanced, then closed the ledger on her pen, as if containing a tremor. "Miss Park," she said, voice low. "A woman in emerald tried to leave a deed with my seal pre-pressed for later signatures. I declined. I stamp signatures, not schemes. Someone wants my seal to do their stealing." She reopened the book to a neat line where a jot of ink read, m.kent.co.nsult @ and beside it my parcel number in her tidy notation. "That alias appeared on a request this afternoon," she murmured. Insisted it was routine. Her finger traced a faint bruise in the paper where someone had pressed her seal without her hand. "I kept the real stamp," she added, chin lifting. "Process matters, even in gala shoes." Thanks in advance had already shifted into logistics. She snapped photos of the jot, the impression, the placard with Mrs. Alvarez's full name, then asked if the conservatory had a volunteer printer. "Back office," Mrs. Alvarez said. "Ask for June." "Thanks," in advance nodded. "We'll make a small packet, fax only." She squeezed my wrist. "We aim for clarity, not spectacle. Proof first, fury later." The words steadied me like tea. We returned to Noah, who was worrying a hangnail into submission. "Can you capture what's on the slide list?" I asked. "Names and timestamps?" He bit his lip, then nodded. "I can screen grab the directory and save properties. Our network logs edits." He tapped keys with surprising grace. The monitor reflected a boy turning into a witness. On the adjacent feed, cameras previewed the stage, a painting of appetite framed in velvet ropes. Pre-stamping is a red line, Mrs. Alvarez continued, eyes mild, words iron. I verify identity, witness signature, note the date, then stamp. Someone wanting the stamp first is someone wanting to skip the person. Don't let your person be skipped. She slid the envelope back toward me without reading it. A courtesy and a boundary. If the board needs me later, I'll be within earshot. Thanks in advance mapped our next moves with the economy of someone who has packed a life in 2 boxes and made it look like 4. Noah captures the file list and properties, she said. I'll print the key shots and Rowan's event emails if I can access the volunteer computer. You stay visible, unafraid. If they push, we ask public questions. She squeezed my hand. We aim the light, not the flame. Noah beckoned us nearer, shoulders hunched like a secret. He had captured the list. Thumbnails lined the screen like obedient soldiers. He clicked the suspect file and opened properties again, then pulled a small phone from his pocket to record the cursor steps. Just in case the directory gets cleaned, he whispered. Files don't lie like faces. The sentence landed with weight. I tucked it into my pocket like flint. Rowan's path kept intersecting approvals. She touched the MC's elbow, the development director's sleeve, the stage manager's clipboard edge, leaving small permissions like fingerprints without oil. Her phone case was clear, the kind that shows its own truth, but the name pulsing behind it tonight wasn't hers. She laughed once at something a patron said and immediately surveyed the room, measuring optics as if joy required witnesses. Near the wings, Rowan conferred with a stagehand whose headset sat crooked, her finger drawing an invisible box in the air. She checked her phone, pulse steady in her throat. As she lifted it, the lock screen blossomed bright, careless, for a heartbeat, and I saw a preview slide across. M. Kent, confirm donor slide. She lowered the device quickly, but the letters had already fastened themselves to me like pins. My mind put pieces together with the tight click of a good pen, the alias m.kent.co.ensalt at, in the ledger, the author field waiting for a name, the business of legacy moving on a timer, now M. Kent asking to confirm a donor slide from behind Rowan's screen. Maybe Rowan was Rowan on the invitation, and someone else in the wires. If this is kindness, why hide the name that asks it? Thanks, in advance reappeared, cheeks pink from the cold back office. Printer works, she said. June is a saint. I've queued a page with the file name, the ledger photo, and your seat tag. We'll keep it clean. She looked at me, measuring my breath. You don't have to hold the whole room alone. I'm not, I said, touching her knuckles. We are a room. Jamie leaned into us like a hinge wanting oil. Thanks in advance rehearsed me under her breath, a quiet coach. If the MC calls you unexpectedly, you don't go. You stand, say you need to clarify, and read from the sticky note. No names, just facts. Jamie nodded solemnly, as if he might hold the other end of my sentence if I dropped it. I can clap later, he whispered. Only when you're smiling for real. I pressed the envelope flat against my lap until the paper warmed. Investigation, not flight, that was the choice. Thanks in advance to the printer, Noah to the logs, Mrs. Alvarez to the oath, me to the truth. The quartet feathered a standard into the rafters. I looked toward the landmark and let my spine remember its work. Whatever name she wore, we would meet it with daylight. I weighed the power in my pocket, a phone with a camera, a grandson with a backpack, a daughter with a spine, a notary with an oath, an intern with a conscience. The math added up to enough. I breathed the words I would need, spare as winter trees. I have not authorized any gift tonight. Let them argue with daylight, not me. Stillness passed through me like a key turned once. M. Kent had written from behind Rowan's glass, asking for confirmation as if we were cogs in her elegant watch. The room sparkled, innocent of what ticked beneath. I was not leaving. I would follow the name into the circuitry and pull it into the light. I realized, with a clean click, that Rowan may not be Rowan. I found Marcus orbiting a trio of patrons near the donor wall, his grin switching on and off like stage light. You said transformational partnerships, I murmured, slipping between a cufflink and a flute of bubbles. What transforms tonight? He clasped my elbow, eyes bright with borrowed conviction. Alignments, Mom. Doors open when people see us as serious players. He spoke like a brochure that had swallowed a clock. I could hear the meters running somewhere behind his words, counting the seconds in interest. We're part of a bigger vision, he said. Trust me tonight. The last word trembled like a high note held too long. Rowan intercepted with a scent of citrus and polish. Elena, have you met the Millbridges? She cooed to the patrons, then to me, almost as an aside. We've arranged a moment in the program to celebrate spontaneous generosity. I tilted my head at the word spontaneous. I noticed legacy gifts in the program, I said, conversational as a porch. She chuckled, every tooth polite. Philanthropy works when timing sings. Tonight, we sing. The sentence wore velvet and steel. Spontaneity looks better on donors, she added, as if I were a mannequin she intended to drape with applause. Thanks, in advance caught my glance and nodded toward the lobby, where a crafts corner had bloomed beside a potted ficus. Volunteers handed out cardstock violins and glitter pens. Let me take Jamie, she said. We'll be near the printer. Jamie hesitated, then miracle he unhooked the backpack and set it carefully under the kid-sized table, like a pet told to stay. I'll watch it, he told the bag, then to me. We won't go far. Thanks, in advance crouched to his height. We're on mission, she whispered. Art and reconnaissance. He beamed, soldier and artist both. At the crafts table, thanks, in advance, slid her phone between paper stars and quietly forwarded me an email thread she'd dug out of her archives. Subject line, donation deed templates for seniors pilot outreach. The sender, Rowan Halstead, 6 months ago. But the signature block at the bottom named a different company than the glossy card I'd seen tonight. R. Halstead Civic Strategies, LLC, not the sleek Halstead and Green Consulting on her current badge. Another reply in the chain came from someone signing MK, Donor Relations Consultant, with a generic contact number and no last name. The attachment name in the thread, Gift, Quitclaim, Template, Rev C, Doc X, had my stomach doing math again. I drifted toward the lobby guest book, where well-wishers wrote notes on cream cards to pinned-up scholarship photos. Rowan stood there, curating sentiment, and a patron asked for her card. She reached into her clutch, withdrew a pen, and signed the back with a flourish left-handed. The nib dragged slightly, the letters leaning uphill, a tilt I recognized. On a proposal board near the silent auction, a scanned Rowan Halstead signature adorned a sponsorship tear sheet. Its leftward slant had looked like style. Now, watching her left hand angle the pen, I felt the first click of a small lock. I wasn't ready to name it, but I set the sound aside for later. Marcus pulled me into a corridor that smelled like wood polish and winter coats. This could put us on the map, he said, words quick, eyes skittering. People notice when you give it the microphone. It shows capacity. The word landed with a banker's handshake. Capacity means debt, Marcus, I said softly. Whose? He flinched, then pasted the smile back on. It's all just positioning, a little leverage, a little attention. You have to spend social capital to get social capital. He was selling hope to himself, sentence by sentence, an installment plan on a feeling. Mom, sometimes a risk is love, he said. Sometimes it's just risk, I answered, and his laugh came out thin. I cut back to the notary table. Mrs. Alvarez's ledger lay open like a narrow mirror. She had added a small, sticky flag beside an impression mark, a faint, misaligned ring where someone had pressed a seal without ink or authority. They tried to take a rubbing, she said, voice level. Like children tracing a coin, she lifted her actual stamp from her bag and set it down with quiet ceremony. This one never leaves my hand when it matters. The difference between the clean, raised seal and the ghostly bruise on the paper felt like the difference between a vow and a rumor. She tapped a line in the ledger. Request received. M.Kent.co and Salt at, for parcel ending 7,714. I looked at the guest list tent on her table, printed in glossy script. That name isn't on the list, I said. She shook her head. nor on the registration spreadsheet I saw this morning. She kept her tone factual, not accusatory, an ethics teacher in gala black. I asked a floor manager to confirm if a Miss Kent had arrived. They said no one by that name checked in. The ledger date gleamed. Today. Could the email be a contractor? I asked. Possibly, she said. But notarization doesn't subcontract identity. If a deed concerns you, I must see you. We must look at the same paper at the same time. Anything else is theater. She smiled without warmth. I enjoy theater, not at my table. I chose a soft path back to Rowan. She stood a breath away from the wing, half shadow, half spotlight. Quick question, I said, friendly as a neighbor at a mailbox. If a donor wished to announce a future intention, how would the paperwork be managed? Her eyes were kind but calculating, a bartender counting bottles while listening to your story. Oh, tonight is celebratory, she said. We often use placeholder copies for stage optics. Formalities happen afterward, keeps it nimble. And a notary? I asked. Unnecessary for an intention, she breathed. This is simply thanking in advance. Her smile wrapped around the contradiction like ribbon. I had the sense of a hand pushing gently on my back toward a door she'd already opened. The MC rehearsed near us, speaking into the ether. During Legacy, we'll bring up 2 families, keep it tight, warm, inspiring. The band vamped something that resembled sincerity. A stagehand flipped the cue sheet, then scurried backstage. The word inspiring moved through my ribs like an allergy. I thanked Rowan for her guidance and stepped away. I did not offer my back to her hand. In the lobby, a cello student in a powder blue dress tuned among paper snowflakes. Jamie sat at the crafts table, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth as he drew a square house under a rectangle roof, 3 windows like patient eyes. Thanks in advance labeled the address in block letters. Jamie pressed a star sticker over the door and wrote home, arduously, letter by letter. We can mail it to our house so it knows it's ours, he said. Thanks in advance kissed his hair. It already knows. She slid me another email on her screen. Rowan pitched deed templates to a retirement book club through a church friend. Thanks in advance said. Language was soft, streamlining generosity, reducing friction. The PDF properties list the creator as M. Kent. She met my eyes. Love doesn't hide in metadata. I exhaled, and my breath came back carrying memory of my kitchen table, where we'd once priced soup ingredients down to the onion half. June can print 3 pages before the queue locks. Thanks, in advance added. I'll grab them. She touched Jamie's backpack with 2 fingers, a ritual of promise. He nodded and kept coloring the sky. He had set the bag down, but his eyes still knew where it was. He is a small compass. He always knows where home is supposed to be. Rowan's voice floated from the wings, soothing a skittish donor. Timing sings, she repeated, and I could almost hear the key change. A volunteer tripped on a cable, then recovered, cheeks flaming. The building thrummed with invisible competence. HVAC sighs, unseen hands, adjusting angles. Nothing squeaked unless it was meant to. I located June at the volunteer booth, a woman with silver hair braided like a crown and a lanyard full of kindness. Back office printer? I asked. For donor materials? Her eyes twinkled. For protecting donor materials, I said. She didn't ask more. Within 2 minutes, she slid 3 warm pages into a manila folder. The file list screenshot showing Elena Park, home gift, final 2, the ledger photo with m.kent.co ensult at, and a page of Rowan's older email with the alternate LLC and MK reply. Do you want staples? She asked. Not yet, I said. I may need to move pieces. Wise, she said, as if we were quilting. I found Marcus again near the bar where sparkling water posed as champagne. Delay any announcement, I said, low. We don't have consent or clean process. Optics will curdle. He rubbed his jaw, eyes skittering between the stage and my face. Mom, please, he said. You don't understand the window we have. This isn't just about us, it's about influence for good. I laid the envelope against his chest, not handing it over, just letting him feel its temperature. It's about our roof, I said. He swallowed. I can fix everything after, he said. No, you can't, I answered. He blinked too fast. Trust me tonight, he said again, softer, a boy at a locked fence trying the same latch. Beyond him, a poster board listed proposed partnerships, and at the bottom right, a thumbnail of a sponsorship agreement displayed a scanned signature labeled Rowan Halstead. The leftward lean matched the tilt I'd seen moments ago when she signed the patron's card. A small, sharp hinge in my head aligned. If she denied authorship later, the angle would stand up and wave. I returned to Noah's nest. He had captured the directory and was now recording a little video. Cursor, click, properties pane, timestamps. Saved 3 ways, he whispered. Phone, cloud, and a thumb drive with tape on it in my sock. He flushed. I over-prepare. You undercut panic, I said. That's a promotion. He smiled, then glanced nervously to the side feeds. They're advancing legacy earlier, he murmured. Something about a surprise. The monitors showed the stage manager lifting a finger to the MC. I felt the schedule tighten around us like a dress one size too small. Keep the video close, I said. We may need to show a few seconds to the side screens if things wobble. He swallowed. I can switch to a laptop input if I accidentally mirror. The word accidentally wore quotes like epaulets. Only if asked, I said. We're not here to set fires. He nodded rapidly. Just lights. I made one more pass by Mrs. Alvarez. If the MC calls on me without warning, may I signal you? I asked. I'll stand within sightline, she said. If asked, I'll say one sentence. I did not notarize any deed for Elena Park today. She closed the ledger, then reopened to the line with m.kent.co.nsalt@, and drew a tiny arrow in the margin, not touching the original notation. Writers mark drafts, she said. Notaries mark truth. Her gaze flicked toward the floor plan posted near the coat check. Whoever M. Kent is, she is not on the public map. Jamie and thanks in advance returned from the crafts corner with a paper house taped to a popsicle stick fence. Jamie handed it to me solemnly. We made a fence, he said. So the house knows which side is inside. My throat tightened. Perfect, I said. Fences can be kind. He considered, then nodded. If they have a gate? He reached for his backpack without picking it up, just keeping a finger hooked through a strap. Emails printed. Thanks in advance, said, tapping the folder under her arm. June added a blank page at the back so we can write talking points. She angled closer so only I could hear. The older email shows Rowan's former LLC, and the PDF properties show M. Kent as author. The mismatch is a seam. If we pull there, something will open. We pull gently, I said. We won't tear the room, she smiled. That's your line. Mine is making the packet readable from the back row. Rowan drifted near again, radiating competence. How are we feeling? She asked, voice soft as a shawl, eyes assessing whether the shawl fit. Grateful for clear processes, I said. They protect everyone. She tilted her head. Of course, we're simply celebrating intention. Her gaze flicked to the envelope bulging my purse, then back up, absent of curiosity, abundant in claim. Enjoy the music, she said. Tonight will be beautiful. It was both invitation and instruction. She moved on, green silk sketching approval across the air. From the stage, the MC's voice gathered us. Ladies and gentlemen, we're making a slight program adjustment to accommodate a surprise celebration. Rowan's smile brightened like a cue lamp. Noah's shoulders tensed. Thanks, in advance slid the printed pages into my hand. Jamie pressed his star-stickered house against my hip and whispered, We can go home after the songs. After the songs, I said. And I meant the song of truth. The building held its breath. I considered every piece I had touched. The left-handed tilt, the alternate LLC, the template language like soap on a slick step, the ledger entry for a name that did not exist in the room, the faint counterfeit bruise of a stolen seal, the file labeled Final 2, insisting it was inevitable. All of it sat in my palms, light as paper, heavy as consequence. Proof first. Thanks in advance, breathed. Fury later. I nodded. Proof now, I said. The cue changed. The band lifted. Timing sang. I was ready to test the note. Plates hadn't landed yet. which meant the room still belonged to speeches and optics, not forks. I decided to interrupt before the applause machine could warm. The program's legacy gifts sat like a red button. I would press my own first. I gathered thanks in advance and Jamie Close, touched the velvet tag that insisted I was a legacy, and set a simple plan. We would be calm, visible, factual. No accusations, only questions with paper in hand. We'd use the hall's microphone against the choreography that expected my smile. The jazz brushed the ceiling. Servers hovered with trays pretending to be clouds. I felt my pulse step down from sprint to march. This would be about timing, not anger, and about light rather than heat. Whatever name hid behind Rowan's polish would have to walk into daylight or away from it. Either way, we would stand. I steadied my breathing carefully. Allies needed places, like pieces waiting for cue lights. Thanks in advance would print key emails and assemble a one-page handout people could read from the back row. Noah would capture the slide list and properties, saving them 3 ways. Mrs. Alvarez would stand within sightline with her ledger, willing to state 1 sentence about process. I wrote our signals on the corner of my program and showed thanks in advance. If the MC tried to overtalk me, she would step forward. If my voice thinned, she would read. I squeezed her hand. If I shake, take the page, finish it clean. She tucked the promise behind her eyes and nodded. Jamie's job was simpler. Sit by me, hold the backpack, and watch my face to know when to steady his. We weren't a committee, we were a family making order. Calm first, then paper, then names only if necessary. Not spectacle, only substance. Noah hunched over the console, shy gravity concentrating his hands. He opened the file directory, hit properties, and let the pain bloom. There it was again, the title pretending to be shy. Elena Park, Home Gift, Final 2. He scrolled lower. Author, M. Kent. Created 2 weeks before the luncheon where Rowan first met me and complimented my scarf as if choosing an alibi. Modified. Tonight. Noah filmed the clicks with his phone, his whisper barely a ripple. Files don't lie like faces. The screen cast a pale square across his cheeks, a boy turning into a witness by inches. He exported a still image and airdropped it to me. The date brand burned on my palm like cold iron. I saw how the plan needed to fit. We'd hold up time itself and let the room compare it to the story on stage. Truth would wear timestamps and walk. No garnish, just the clock exposed. I took the program and wrote a speech, the length of a held breath. 30 seconds of clean language, no adjectives I couldn't defend. Good evening. Before you applaud, I need to clarify a matter about my home. A sealed envelope naming my parcel was placed under my seat. A slide titled, Elena Park Home Gift is cued. I have not authorized any gift tonight. I printed each sentence like a road sign, then added a final line. I'm asking for process, not praise. I practiced the pace under the music, letting the trumpet teach me restraint. Anger wanted verbs. I gave it commas. I penciled the order of our props. Seat tag, envelope, slide still, ledger excerpt. I drew a tiny box for breath. If I shook, the page would hold steadier than my hands. Policy, not personality, would carry my words across the marble. Calm would do the lifting. Mrs. Alvarez met me near the side aisle, where ushers guard the threshold between audience and stage. She had moved her chair slightly forward, ledger within reach like a psalm. If you need me, she said, I will be where the board can see me. We reviewed the single sentence she was willing to offer, nothing more, nothing less. If asked, I'll say it plain. The process was bent. Her mouth made a straight line of the words, no decoration. She showed me her real stamp, cool brass asleep in its case, and the page where the faint counterfeit bruise had tried to mimic authority. I will not accuse, she reminded us gently. I will describe. That distinction felt like clean glass. She asked me to breathe with her for 4 counts. We did, 2 women deciding to be taller than our fear without becoming louder than our truth tonight. I intercepted Marcus near the stair landing where plants pretend to be trees. No announcements, I said, gentle as a warning label. Postpone. We lack consent and clean sequence. Optics will sour. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing toward the wings as if courage might be stored there. "Mom, this is bigger than us," he said. "Doors, relationships, momentum." I held up the envelope so he could feel its gravity without touching it. "It is exactly us," I answered. "It is a roof." He looked at my face, really looked, and something unclenched. He leaned in, kissed my forehead like he used to after track meets. "Okay, I'll stop it. I promise." The boy glimmered through the man. I almost cried from the mercy of being believed. He turned toward the wing, shoulders squared for a new conversation. I allowed hope to loosen its fists. For one moment. It lasted the length of a chorus. Noah found me at the aisle's edge, breath quick, eyes apologizing for the world. "I pulled the slide," he whispered, "but it just came back. Someone reloaded it from a USB named Rowan President," he swallowed. "They're bypassing the network log." On his screen, the directory flickered, the file hopping places like a staged coincidence. My son's promise fluttered, brave and small against larger weather. I looked to the wing and saw Rowan's hand deliver a silver stick to a runner, then float away as if the air had carried it. "Promises can be overruled by panic," I told myself, feeling the old tremor tap my wrist bone with a teaspoon. Thanks in advance stepped beside me, packet under her arm, pulse steady. "No change," she said. "Proof first." We reset our plan with quiet clicks, as if reloading a heartbeat. Resolve filled the empty measures again. As the runner disappeared, Rowan's clutch snapped shut, and a business card slipped free, skittering under a chair before stopping at my shoe. I knelt, palm over it like calming a bird. The front was cream, embossed in tasteful charcoal, Rowan Halstead Consulting. When I turned it, the back carried a faint, off-center blind stamp, MK. The letters were so pale they might have been a printing ghost, but once seen, they refused to disappear. MK did not belong to Rowan Halstead. I photographed both sides, then the clutch itself where the card had fallen, green silk pooling like a well. The misprint felt like a seam in a costume, invisible from the audience, damning under a work light. I slipped the card into my program beside the speech, a quiet blade wrapped in paper. The initials would matter later, paired with metadata. I could feel them humming under everything. I brought the misprint to thanks in advance, not with drama, but with the small satisfaction of a puzzle piece clicking home. She scanned the photo, then the letters, then me. "Good," she said. "We keep it holstered until needed." She flipped our packet, added a sticky flag to the ledger photo, and circled the creation date on the slide properties. "Order of show," she whispered. "You speak." Noah rolls 10 seconds of directory. Mrs. Alvarez states process. Only then do we name the author field or the initials if necessary. June appeared with paper clips like a nurse with bandages. We accepted enough for aisle ends, not a deluge. Thanks. In advance positioned 2 copies near the board chair's table and held 3 in reserve. We sketched our physical map. I would stand at row 5, thanks in advance at 7, Noah in the bay, Mrs. Alvarez within the board's view. Jamie stayed with me. The stage manager lifted a finger and the MC's voice warmed, the tonal shift that tells a room it is being gathered. "We're moving the legacy celebration earlier," he announced to staff, unaware that sound travels like rumor. Noah glanced at me. I answered with a nod that meant proceed only when invited by chaos. He touched his laptop, ready to mirror the directory if asked, not before. "Only if asked," I reminded him. "We aren't here to embarrass. We're here to correct." He mouthed, "Understood." The band relaxed into a brighter number. Servers swapped water for wine, plates stacked like future interruptions behind a curtain. I checked the speech again, touched the sequence of props, felt my heartbeat stay inside its lane. The envelope lay in my purse like a small animal learning to sleep. We were ready to ask the room to think before it clapped. For once. I looked across the hall and found Rowan already half-turned toward the wings, profile composed for photographs that had not yet been taken. The emerald made her a lighthouse no storm could drown. She smiled at a donor, then checked her phone with a flick that seemed practiced to the second. Somewhere, MK lived behind that glass, moving slides like furniture. I thought of the initials on the card, the author line on the file, the email alias in the ledger. Threads waited to be pulled in public, not behind velvet. Thanks, in advance, pressed her shoulder to mine, steadying us both without appearing to. Whatever happens, she said, we'll stay kind. Kind and stubborn, I said. She smiled, battle ready. The jazz shifted keys. Ushers floated to their positions. I folded my speech once more, letting the crease remember me. When they called for legacy, we would answer first together. On the foyer's side wall, a wayward monitor blinked out of slideshow rotation and, for 3 startled seconds, displayed a slide that shouldn't have seen daylight. Elena Park home gift, with a photo of my porch clipped from a realtor's website. The closest donors froze mid-sip, whispers lifted like a flock flushed from hedges. I watched the green of Rowan's dress cut through the murmurs. She saw the screen, saw me seeing, and moved no wasted motion toward a merch table where a silver USB lay coiled like bait. She palmed it, slipped past a velvet rope, and vanished backstage. The room's tempo changed. The stage manager lifted a headset cup, listened, and drew a finger across the cue sheet. The MC's voice, off-mic, carried, "We're moving legacy forward to accommodate a surprise. Servers rerouted like fish when a shadow passes." Noah flicked me a glance from the tech bay. The slide list on his monitor now showed the file reloaded from an external drive. Thanks in advance squeezed my palm once, steel disguised as kindness. I followed the emerald wake to the service corridor. The air smelled of gaffer tape and dusted velvet. Stagehands skimmed around, taped X's on the floor, speaking in shorthand. A young runner hustled by, eyes on a clipboard. "Mara," he blurted, then stumbled, correcting himself when Rowan turned. "Rowan, your segment's up." His face flushed the color of exit signs. The name hung there like a coat on the wrong hook. "Perfect," Rowan said, smile tight, voice honeyed and hollow. "Keep it rolling." She pressed the USB into the stage manager's palm, and with that small transfer, control tipped. The program would carry her forward whether the room understood or not. I felt the floor's subtle hum through my shoes, the hall itself preparing to applaud on command. For an instant, my courage thinned like paper held to light. Then I remembered our plan. Proof first. Light over flame. I touched the envelope, the packet, the photo of the misprinted MK, the time-stamped author field. I pictured Jamie's backpack under the crafts table like a tiny lifeboat. The band modulated. The MC stepped toward the proscenium, smile polished, cue lights warming the wings. I drew a breath that belonged to me. "Then I roll too," I told myself, and turned toward the aisle. Behind me, whispers braided into resolve. Ahead, the stage brightened, and truth waited for its microphone. I stepped forward. Rowan found me at the aisle like a tide meeting a rock, voice velvet pulled over steel. "Elena," she murmured, angling her body so the nearest patrons could see us without hearing. "To keep the program smooth, we'll invite you up to sign a ceremonial copy paperwork later." Her eyes smiled, and the rest of her measured me. "Let the city clap for you. I'll handle the ink." The sentence slid a silk ribbon through a noose. I kept my hands folded on my program so she couldn't see them tremble. "I'm not authorizing any gift tonight," I said, keeping my voice the temperature of room air. "And I don't sign anything that pretends I did." She tilted her head as if I'd mispronounced a word at a luncheon. "Anxiety is normal on stage," she cooed. "Marcus has authority to complete formalities if needed. You granted a broad POA after your health event. He can relieve you of stress." The word relieve patted my shoulder like a tranquilizer. I felt the old document rustle in my memory drawer, paper rattling its chains. Security arrived in apology black suits. "Ma'am," one said softly, "for Flo, please remain seated until after the legacy segment. We'll escort you if you're called." The phrasing sounded polite. The geometry was containment. I smiled at their good intentions and sat. An old trick I learned from nurses. You can cooperate and still keep your hand on the IV line. Rowan nodded approval to no one in particular and drifted away, her emerald wake inviting admiration to follow. Marcus slipped into the seat beside me, knee bouncing. "It's under control," he whispered, twitching a napkin into a smaller square. "They just want to thank you from the stage." I turned my head slowly. "Son, please do not let anyone use my name like a prop." He swallowed. Adam's apple, a frightened bird. "Mom, this is bigger than us. This will open doors." He almost believed the doors were for me. "Please, Mom, please don't ruin this." The beg threaded through the practiced pitch. It hurt more than the pitch. I heard Det panting behind his words, desperate for a couch to lie down on. Across the aisle, thanks in advance moved like a breeze does when it has found purpose. She slipped into a service corridor and disappeared. Jamie pressed his backpack to his stomach, eyes scanning my face for the weather. I smoothed the hair above his ear. "We're okay," I said. My phone buzzed, then flashed a sliver of battery red enough to feel like a warning light. I dimmed the screen and tucked it back, a candle in a storm cuffed by my palm. The MC drifted nearer, greeting donors with television sincerity. When he reached our row, he clasped my hand with both of his and performed our acquaintance for the room. "We so appreciate visionary hearts," he said, performing plural nouns as if he were distributing them like canapes. In a few moments, I said gently. "You'll be asked to pause while I clarify." His smile wavered like a hand meeting a door it didn't expect. "Of course," he said, not yet believing anything could slow a gala. A ripple reached us from the corridor, raised voices, quickly muffled. Thanks in advance appeared at my shoulder, breath contained, eyes bright. "I went to fetch Mrs. Alvarez," she whispered. Rowan cornered her by the stairwell and threatened to file a complaint with the board if she undermines donors. Micro-reveal hash height landed on the table between us like a stone wrapped in velvet. She said those words. "Thanks," in advance added. I recorded the last sentence. She squeezed my wrist. Mrs. Alvarez didn't bend. She said, "I stamp signatures, not schemes." But she's rattled. I watched the notary return to her table with a dignity that made her dress look like armor. She adjusted the ledger until it was square, then rested her palm on its edge the way a person touches a railing when the ship lists. Rowan glided past with 3 air kisses for patrons who'd never tasted that form of hunger. I felt a sudden urge to shield Mrs. Alvarez with my body, as if ethics could be struck by flying glass. At coat check, a volunteer with genuine freckles and counterfeit calm frowned into a cubby. "Your purse is not here," she said, repeating the sentence as if it might summon the bag. "We'll locate it." My driver's license and backup phone charger were inside. I thanked her and walked back to the hall, feeling the peculiar weight of missing something you still have to pretend you own. Loss does that, turns your posture into theater. Marcus intercepted again, breath citrus sweet and shallow. "I talked to Rowan," he said. "She says we can do a symbolic acknowledgement and clean up paperwork tomorrow. It'll be fine." "Symbolic theft is still theft," I said. "I won't give you embarrassment to launder." He flinched. "Why are you making this hard?" he hissed. "Because you are making it easy for the wrong person," I said. He looked past me at the stage where lights warmed the microphones like baked apples. "This is an opportunity," he insisted, less convinced this time. "For whom?" I asked. He didn't answer. He met his shoe with his stare. "Thanks," in advance returned with a warm sheaf of paper, a triumph tucked into the corner of her mouth. "June helped me print the emails," she said. "One shows MK, editing the donation template. Your parcel number is in tracked changes. The margin says confirm parcel 7714 with her initials." She flipped to the proof like a dealer delivering a card. There it was, a tidy red bubble with MK and my life in it. "We'll distribute only if needed," she reminded me. "Proof first, fury never." Mrs. Alvarez approached, spine haltingly straight. "I'll speak if called," she said, voice low. "I won't accuse. But I received a message from a board liaison asking me to avoid process confusion at the microphone." She smoothed a non-existent wrinkle at her hip. "I fear being framed as fussy." Thanks in advance touched her elbow. "Fussy is how bridges stay up," she said. Mrs. Alvarez half smiled. "I will answer truthfully if asked." She looked at me. Truth often sounds fussy to hurry. The band paused, tuning sincerity. The MC's voice edged toward performance height. I felt the optics shifting against me like tall grass leaning with the wind. In 3 rows, I caught sympathetic eyes. In 2 rows, hunger. At my table, calculation. A donor behind me whispered, "Cold feet," with the relish of someone who has never felt ice creep above the ankle. I straightened my program and let my breath practice walking a straight line. Rowan returned for the kill, wrapped in charm. "Marcus told me you're feeling overwhelmed," she said, bending so the gem at her throat caught the footlights. "Everyone wants this to be beautiful. Beauty as a silencer. I had known that trick since the first casserole after my husband died. Beauty will survive a pause," I said. "Consent won't survive a shove." She lowered her voice until it had texture. "If you obstruct a public celebration, you embarrass your son." The words were a scalpel designed to cut me where I bled. I stared at her until the scalpel dulled. "He is embarrassing himself," I said softly, "by forgetting home." Jamie tugged my sleeve, the quietest bell. "I don't want to clap if you're sad," he said. I turned to him with the smile I save for mornings when bills arrive at the same time milk runs out. "Then we won't clap for sad things," I said. He nodded, solemn as an owl, and slid his backpack under his chair so neatly I wanted to weep. He had decided, instinctively, to keep his hands free. Security returned, firmer now that the clock had their backs. "Ma'am, please remain in your seat until the segment concludes," the taller one said. "It's about safety and order." I heard the subtext, "Keep the spectacle on schedule." "Of course," I said, and then stood not to bolt, but to check the aisle sightline. "I will speak from here when the slide appears." The guard glanced toward the stage manager, who pretended not to see. Bureaucracy loves eyesight problems when truth wants crossing. The MC stepped into the glow. "Ladies and gentlemen," he sang, "tonight we celebrate legacy gifts that change our city." Applause began to assemble itself. I held up my hand to thanks in advance, palm out. Wait. The first slide wasn't me. It was a smiling couple beside a bronze donor plaque. The second was a youth orchestra field trip. The third, Noah's glance told me before the screen did, was the porch of my house clipped from the realtor site, the caption already printed in the corner like a verdict. I rose, heart steady because I told it to be. "Before you applaud," I said, voice carrying further than I expected, "may I clarify a matter about my home?" The hall's sound changed from applause to listening. The difference is all the difference. Rowan moved instantly, a dancer gliding to intercept choreography gone rogue. "A misunderstanding," she announced, smile firming. "Miss Park has generously indicated." Noah's side monitor flickered, then briefly mirrored the directory he'd recorded. Elena Park, home gift, final 2, timestamps visible. A hush moved through the room like a silk sheet. Rowan leaned toward the mic stand, cutting my line of sight. "We are simply honoring intention," she said. "Let the city clap for you. I'll handle the ink." I turned my head to the board chair, whose eyebrows were performing caution. "I have not authorized any gift tonight," I repeated. "Process protects everyone." The chair's gaze slid to Mrs. Alvarez, whose face said, "I will answer if asked, and also, I am not your weapon." He hesitated. Spectacle yanked on one hand. Liability tugged the other. For a moment he held. Marcus rose midway down the row, reaching for me and for the room. "She's nervous," he said, voice cracking on the second word. "Mom, please." My son's plea split me cleanly in two. Mother, citizen. "If grace has teeth," I whispered to thanks in advance, "show me how to bite without drawing blood." She stepped forward, not to fight, but to hold the folder where the board chair could see the margin bubble. M. K. Confirm parcel 7714. We didn't thrust it, we let it exist. A volunteer appeared at my elbow, cheeks pink from the cold air of the loading dock. "They found your purse," she said. It was moved to a staff shelf by mistake. Relief washed up, then retreated. The battery was still red, the night still sloped. I thanked her, then faced the stage again. Rowan's shoulder cut the sightline like a curtain. "We'll resolve this privately," she said through a smile broad enough for photographs. "The audience deserves celebration. They deserve truth," I said. "Truth is celebration." The board chair lifted a hand, palm down, the universal sign for landing an airplane 2 beats early. "Let's pause," he said into his table mic, which carried enough to register, not enough to embarrass. The MC faltered. The band softened. Rowan's smile thinned, then returned with reinforcement. She adjusted the lapel that needed no adjustment. "Elena," she said, sweetened blade resheathed. "We can hold your acknowledgement until after dessert." The weapon remained the same. Delay until optics made resistance look petty. My phone buzzed again. The battery icon winked, like a lighthouse failing its duty. I silenced it and prayed the red would last longer than the next sentence. I looked at Marcus. He looked at Jamie. His mouth folded once, twice, trying to find a shape that could hold apology and ambition at the same time. None fit. He Saturday. That was a kind of courage I had not expected to get tonight. Losses tallied themselves without my permission. Almost purse, almost voice, almost son. The humiliation risk stood ready in the wings, wearing daily clothes, polite pity, twisted gossip, the story told without my sentences in it. I felt small, and then stood taller inside smallness. The slide with my porch lingered like a trespasser who believes your living room is public space. I did not look away. The room waited to be told who to clap for. I decided to tell it to wait one more breath. The restroom was quiet enough to hear the building breathe. Marble held the cool, and the mirrors repeated me until I felt like a committee that could not agree. I shut myself into a stall and let it break shock first, clean and bright as dropped glass. Then hurt, a slow ache behind the ribs where memory hangs its coat. Then anger, all corners. Then the helplessness that makes hands useless. I pressed my palm to the wall till my pulse steadied under the tile. The fluorescent light hummed like a thought that would not turn off. I stayed until the jazz outside softened into something I could walk through without shattering. At the sinks, I washed my hands as if rinsing off applause that did not belong to me. My face looked like a map someone had folded and unfolded too many times. I whispered to the mirror, a rehearsal made of breath. "You tell the truth, Elena. Let the room decide." The faucet stuttered and then ran clear. I dabbed my eyes with paper that left no lint and felt the old edge of the stroke year, the thin seam where words once slipped. Not tonight. I cupped cold water and taught my hands the tempo of calm. "Thanks in advance" slipped in, posted lookout with her foot against the door. She set a manila folder on the marble like bread meant to keep us alive. "We refine," she said softly. "Facts first, then names only when established. We protect Jamie. No slurs, no spectacle, public truth with dignity." She opened to a single page she had drafted, simple and spare, bullet points without blame, timestamps, document properties. A still of the slide list, a line at the bottom, statement, "Notary confirms no deed notarized for Elena Park today." She tapped the white space, readable from the back row, objective language. "No adjectives we cannot defend." Her anchor line brushed my ribs. "We aim the light, not the flame." She said it like a vow. I nodded, grateful that my daughter's steadiness had learned to speak in sentences that fit into pockets. She added a second page for me alone, a half sheet with the speech we had shaped. 4 lines, each one a rung I could climb. "If your voice wobbles," she said, "I take it and finish it clean." I exhaled, and the breath did not scrape this time. The mirror gave me back a woman who could hold stillness in her hands and call it courage. Noah knocked twice, respectful as a boy at a neighbor's back door. "Thanks," in advance, cracked the door and waved him in. He kept his eyes politely up, as if the room were a church. "I compressed the screen record," he whispered, lifting his phone like a candle. "Directory, file name, properties, and the moment the USB repopulates the list, it plays without sound. I also isolated the voice memo you asked me to capture from my headset, the cue the slide when she's smiling line. I trimmed the noise, boosted the clarity, and saved both to my phone and the cloud." He swallowed. "If the MC tries to roll over you, I can mirror the directory to the side monitor for 3 seconds without disrupting the main feed. Only if you signal." I touched his wrist lightly. "Only if asked by chaos," I said. "We are not here to humiliate. We are here to prevent a theft." He nodded, relief and resolve sharing his face. "Files don't lie like faces," he murmured again, almost to himself. He handed "Thanks in advance" a tiny card with a QR linking to the video as backup. "Thanks in advance" tucked it into the folder, practical as always. Noah stepped back toward the door, then forward again, as if an afterthought had tugged his sleeve. "I set my phone to airplane mode," he added. No one can push a remote wipe. The boy was turning into a safeguard right there on the tile. Mrs. Alvarez entered with the gravity of a woman who knows a rule is a bridge. She carried her ledger and a crisp photocopy of a single-line parcel ending 7,714 and the email alias that refused to belong to the room outside. "I have removed personal information," she said. And I wrote the sentence I am prepared to say if asked. "I did not notarize any deed for Elena Park today." She placed the copy on the counter and aligned it with the tile grout, precise as a blessing. "I am not your weapon, but I will be your witness." Her eyes stayed kind and severe at the same time, the way winter sun can be. We stood together in the echo and checked each piece against the others like a quartet tuning. Thanks in advance's one-pager, timestamps, properties, ledger excerpt, objective phrasing, Noah's compressed screen record and the brief voice memo. Mrs. Alvarez's statement written in ink that did not tremble. My speech, measured. We set signals. If my voice falters, thanks, in advance steps up and reads. If the MC tries to roll over me, Mrs. Alvarez says one line, and Noah plays the memo. If security moves to escort, we remain seated and ask for the board chair. No shouting. No names until evidence lives on the screen or in the chair's hand. We rehearse the handoffs with our eyes, a nod, a breath, the tilt of a folder. I leaned toward the mirror again and found the thread of anger that was left. It wanted a fight. It wanted to drag Rowan by her emerald ribbon and shake out every alias. It wanted to humiliate whoever thought my house looked best on a projector. I let the wanting pass through me like weather. Justice over revenge, I told the woman in the glass. Revenge burns fuel, you still need to get home. Justice walks. Jamie's face surfaced behind my eyes, the backpack under his chair like a small ark, the paper fence he made to teach the word inside. Home is made of daily choices you do not get applause for. I pressed my hand over the lower edge of my ribs and felt the quiet there. This would be about the house, yes, but also about the boy who believed in gates. We will not frighten him, I said. Thanks, in advance nodded. He sits beside you, she said. If anything tilts, I take him to the crafts corner and we listen from the door. June will stand with us. I pictured June's silver braid and calm eyes and felt the room widen around my grandson like a held breath. A small memory tapped my shoulder. In the lobby, Rowan had signed a card left-handed, pen angled uphill. On the sponsorship board, the scanned signature leaned the same way, a stylized slope that pretended to be flourish, micro-reveal, but not a spear. I marked it quietly on Thanks in Advance's private page. Left-handed signature angle, possible tell if needed, secondary, not primary. We would not build our case on style. We would use it only if contradiction required a nudge. Evidence first, handwriting later, if the ground asked for it. We checked the timing. The legacy segment had been pulled forward, but dessert plates still hovered in the wings like moons waiting for permission. We had a window shaped like 3 songs and a sponsor reel. Thanks in Advance folded the one-pager so the board chair could see the top half without requiring a speech. Noah showed me the first frame of his screen record directory, unambiguous. Mrs. Alvarez slid her sentence into an outer pocket of her ledger, ready to retrieve without drama. We breathed in together, and out in sequence, a human metronome. Thanks in Advance laid out logistics the way a nurse lays out instruments. You stand at row 5, aisle side, she said. I'm at 7, with Jamie on the inside seat beside you. June is in the aisle behind us, ready to help walk him to the lobby if the noise grows. Noah stays in the bay and mirrors only on signal. Mrs. Alvarez holds the sightline to the board chair. If we do name the author field, it will be paired with the business card misprint. Names after proof. I said the words back to her, not because I doubted them, but because my mouth needed to remember. Proof first, I said. Names only when established. Protect the child. Dignity, always. Mrs. Alvarez rinsed her hands as if to mark the moment between preparation and action. Do not fear the pause, she said. After you state your line, let them feel the silence. People hear more inside it. She dried her fingers and smiled, a small smile meant for someone who has survived worse. The law is slow because it needs to be careful. Be careful. Noah glanced at the closed door as footsteps went past. They are placing the lectern 2 feet forward, he said, head tilted, ear tuned to the invisible orchestra of tech. That gives you a cleaner line of sight from the aisle. The side monitors are still on the loop. I can interrupt the loop with the directory for a heartbeat enough to show file name and author. I will not play the memo unless the MC cuts you. He tucked the phone into an inside pocket and patted it once, as if to reassure it, or himself. My hands found steadiness where nothing else had. I am not going to accuse intent, I said, checking that the sentence lived in my mouth and not just on the page. I am going to ask questions with evidence in hand. The mirror agreed. I smoothed the edges of the speech until they lay flat. The woman looking back at me had not grown younger tonight. She had grown precise. Precision can be a kindness when the room expects a scene. We cracked the door and listened to the hall. The band leaned into a bright bridge. A laugh lifted, then settled. I thought of the file created 2 weeks before Rowan met me, of the alias in the ledger, of the misprint whispering MK, of the USB slipping across a palm. I thought of my son, vibrating with the idea of doors he could open, forgetting that a house is a door you have to protect first. I forgave him as far as I could without letting go of the lock. Thanks, in advance, touched my elbow. You ready? She asked. I nodded. I am ready enough. She smiled. That is the right amount. We stepped into the corridor. Mrs. Alvarez fell in beside us, ledger tucked like a hymn book. Noah peeled away toward the bay, shoulders squared as if his headset were a badge. The air tasted like lemon and courage. My shoes made a sound on the floor that felt like punctuation. Outside, the MC's voice gathered itself for warmth. Inside, my voice gathered itself for truth. I looked down the hallway toward the crafts corner and saw the paper fence Jamie made propped against a cup of markers, star sticker shining over the door. A silly little gate, and yet the truest thing I would carry to the stage. I pictured his question, soft as bedtime. Can our house hear us when we laugh? It always has. But tonight, it also needed to hear me when I said no. We stopped at the threshold where public begins. Thanks in advance slid the one-pager into my hand, and it felt like a small shield that would not bruise the person who bumped into it. Mrs. Alvarez rested her fingers lightly on my forearm, permission without pressure. Noah lifted his screen a fraction and let it glow once, then tucked it away, promise made. I breathed once for my husband, once for my son, once for my daughter, once for my grandson, and once for myself. 5 breaths. Enough. Then we do it. Thanks, in advance, said voice low. We aim the light, not the flame. I smiled, not because it was easy, but because the line fit. Thank you, I said to all of them, and to the mirror behind us that had held my fear without cracking. We stepped into the aisle, and the hall turned its face toward the stage. The moment opened like a gate that had been waiting for the right hands. I walked forward, taking my place where truth could stand without shouting. Lights warmed the proscenium as the MC stepped into his practiced glow, and the band softened to a generous hush. Tonight, he sang, we celebrate legacy gifts that change our city. On the side screens, a slide of a smiling older couple faded through a tasteful dissolve. I stood, not rushing, letting the chair sigh back into place. Before you applaud, may I clarify a matter about my home? The room tilted from performance to listening. Forks hovered, a throat cleared, and then thought better. I held up the sealed envelope I'd found beneath my seat, its flap still crisp from the expectation that I would obey it. I read the yellow sticky note aloud so the room could borrow my eyes. Stage left announced the gift during donor tributes. Gasps rippled in polite miniature, the sound of people remembering they also have houses. Noah, at the tech bay, caught my glance and nodded. For a heartbeat, the side monitors switched to his recorded screen, a directory list, a cursor, and the file name none of us had consented to. Elena Park, home gift, final 2. The audience leaned in the way wheat leans before wind arrives. I said the sentence we had polished to glass. I have not authorized any gift tonight. Thanks in advance was already moving, distributing the one-pager down the aisles, bullet points, timestamps, document properties, and at the bottom, a single clear line. Mrs. Alvarez stepped into sight. Ledger held like a covenant. As a notary, she said, voice level, I did not notarize any deed for Elena Park today. A pre-stamped packet was requested improperly. The MC stammered, smile faltering as if he'd been handed a violin with one string. Rowan glided forward, serene as stage fog. "A misunderstanding," she said, turning to gather the room with her hands. "We're honoring intention." Noah, on cue from my nod, tapped his phone. The side speakers carried a muffled instruction lifted from her headset earlier, cleaned just enough to be unmistakable. Cue the slide when she's smiling. The gasp this time had edges. I kept my voice low, as if reading a recipe. Charity cannot run on coerced consent. Beside me, Jamie's small hand found my sleeve and stayed there. Thanks in advance lifted the packet slightly so the board chair could see the top half without leaving his seat. "If we may, one more clarification," I said. "The PDF properties on that prepared slide list show an author." "Thanks," in advance pointed to the line on Noah's recording, "Author, M. Kent," where the cursor paused like a pointing finger. I drew out the cream business card that had skittered from Rowan's clutch and showed its back to the nearest usher, a faint blind-stamped MK, misprinted, off-center. Mrs. Alvarez opened her ledger to the flagged line and held it where the board chair could read the jot. Requester Mara Kent, parcel ending 7714. The board chair rose, not dramatically, just enough to anchor the room. "Miss Halstead," he said, gaze steady, "is your legal name Mara Kent?" Rowan's mask flickered. I saw calculations search for dignity and miss. "Rowan is my professional. We'll need you to step outside now," the chair said, firm and dry as legal paper. Two security staff appeared like parentheses around her calm. She protested nothing. That was her skill exit without evidence. As they guided her toward the wings, the room's sound changed, the frequency sliding from admiration to something protective I could feel in my wrists, not at me, but for me. Someone started to clap and then thought better. Applause tonight would need to relearn its job. Marcus turned, slowly, as if rotating through the years it had taken to arrive at this moment. He looked at Jamie, then at me, and something broke that needed breaking. He crouched to our row, voice thin and real. "I am so sorry, buddy. I forgot what home island." Jamie exhaled like a tire finally finding its proper road. Then, with solemn ceremony, he unzipped the little backpack he'd guarded all evening and showed us what he had packed without telling. Pajamas folded to bravery, a toothbrush, a plastic cup, and 3 small dinosaurs lined up like cousins. He had been braced to move. I pressed my palm to his hair and nodded as if he were the bravest person here, because he was. I faced the room again. "We are not here to shame. We are here to correct a process." The board chair, still standing, adjusted his glasses. "Miss Halstead or Miss Kent, this is not the forum to perfect a deed." I nodded. "Thank you." The MC swallowed, then tried to shepherd the evening back into its original story. "Let's return to our celebration," he began, but the sentence lacked a place to stand. In row 3, an older donor with a velvet collar spoke without rising, voice carrying with the authority of someone who had already given enough. "Protect her house." The murmur around him quickened into agreement. I held up the velvet seat tag donor gold, legacy, so the words that had tried to script me could testify to their own presumption. I lifted the envelope again, then let the sticky note speak for itself to the nearest camera. "Thanks in advance." Keeping tempo, placed a copy of our one-pager on the board table. The chair studied the bullet points as if they were a map to an exit. "Mrs. Alvarez did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Process protects everyone," she said again. A benediction rewritten as policy. Rowan Mara, if the ledger and metadata were to be believed, kept her spine unbent as the security pair guided her toward the service corridor. In the glareless backstage light, her face looked briefly unselected, like a theater seat before a name card is placed. She did not look back. The MC tried again, voice gentled by necessity. "We thank all donors for their integrity," he said, finding the only sentence available. I eased into my seat, still standing inside, and slid the envelope back into my purse, which had finally been returned to me with apologies and a faint scent of storage. "Thanks." In Advance's hand found mine under the program. Her fingers, cool and sure, counted a slow measure I could match. Around us, conversations restarted carefully, like engines after a winter night. Some faces tried on disapproval and found it didn't fit. Others softened, thinking of their own porches and parcels and the quiet drama of keeping what you already earned. A donor across the aisle raised her glass slightly toward me, a small toast, private, almost invisible. My mind, now that heat had cooled, noted the simple tells it hadn't mentioned aloud: the left-handed flourish I'd seen earlier, the slant on the sponsorship board, the embossed MK hiding on a card's back. They would matter later if anyone tried to revise tonight. For now, daylight had done its work. Noah hovered at the aisle edge, seeking permission to smile. I nodded at him, his shoulders dropped half an inch, and he returned to the bay, headphones settling like laurel that wouldn't brag. June, our volunteer ally, collected a few stray one-pagers from the floor and tucked them neatly beside water glasses, as if they were coasters the room might need again. The board chair leaned toward his microphone, then thought better, and instead crossed to our aisle. In a voice built for corridors, he said, "Miss Park, thank you for addressing the matter with restraint. Restraint is easier when people are willing to look," I answered. He gave a small nod, equal parts apology and promise, and returned to his table. Marcus sank into the seat beside Jamie and rubbed his temples like a penitent trying to erase himself. "I thought I could steer it," he whispered. "I thought intention could cover shortcuts. Intention is a light," I said. "It isn't a bridge." He nodded, throat working. "I'll help you fix whatever comes next," he said. Jamie leaned into him, dinosaurs clacking softly together. "We're not moving tonight," I told Jamie, and I meant every board in the house. He nodded seriously, then zipped the backpack again, satisfied that for once the emergency could stay imaginary. The program tried to proceed, humbled. The band chose a soft standard. A youth quartet took their places with faces bright and careful. I listened, grateful for the exactness of music, which always requires consent between notes. During the second piece, a woman from the development office slipped me a card with a phone number for the conservatory's council. "For any follow-up," she murmured. I thanked her and tucked it beside the envelope, where both could keep each other honest. I took a last look at the side monitor, now back to donor photos, and felt the odd calm that follows a storm that chose not to break you. The record existed where fiction had tried to stand: directory, metadata, ledger, statement, witnesses. Truth had entered the microphone, and the room had heard itself. Across the aisle, the older donor caught my eye and nodded once, the nod elders give when a younger person has done something difficult and practical. I mouthed, "Thank you." She lifted her program as if to shield a flame from wind. Behind her, the donor wall scrolled on, slower now to my eyes, each glowing name a reminder that generosity needs guardrails to stay true. I breathed, unclenched the grip I had kept on the envelope, and felt the softness return to my hands. Whatever storm still waited outside the hall could wait one more piece. Inside, we had done the simplest hard thing, told the truth, where the lie wanted applause. Jamie leaned into my shoulder, heavy with relief, and the quintet finished their number on a chord that sounded like a door clicking into place. I looked at my family, at the program, at the aisle we had used like a bridge, and felt the floor hold us tighter. Security flanked Rowan as the board chair stood, and the hall felt its center slide back where it belonged. She kept her spine tall as they guided her toward the service corridor, emerald turning darker as the light dropped. The MC breathed in, then spoke into a humbled microphone. He apologized for the confusion, canceled the legacy segment, and asked the band to soften the room. The quintet obliged with a piece that sounded like good rain. The board chair leaned to his table mic and let the evening hear its boundary. Our stage is for music, not manipulation. A practical hush replaced performance. Servers paused. People looked down at their programs as if they might find instructions for decency. I remained standing long enough for the moment to settle, then sat, hands resting on the envelope, as if it were a sleeping bird I had promised not to drop. I turned slightly toward the nearest microphone and let my voice meet it without ambition. "Thank you for listening. That is all I needed tonight." The room exhaled, a collected breath that released its grip on the script it had been handed. The MC nodded, grateful for a sentence that closed the door without slamming it. On the side screens, the slideshow returned to students in brass sections and winter coats, as if the building remembered its job. A volunteer slid a glass of water to the edge of our row. I took a slow sip and felt dignity return to my mouth. The board chair spoke briefly with counsel, then inclined his head toward me, not as reward, but as acknowledgement. Around us, conversation found quieter gears. The donors who wished to approve without staring did so by studying their plates and letting the soft music carry their agreement. Marcus slid into the aisle and knelt by Jamie, the way fathers do when they remember which height matters. "I'm sorry I didn't see it," he said, voice small enough to fit under our table. Jamie watched him carefully, then nodded once, solemn as a judge of stuffed animals. Marcus looked up at me, waiting for a verdict I could not give tonight. I placed my hand on his shoulder and let it rest there, neither withdrawing nor blessing. Forgiveness is a process, not a cue. It needs pages and daylight. He closed his eyes with that sentence, as if permission to wait were a kind of mercy he had forgotten existed. The band played something like a lullaby for grown-ups. Jamie leaned his cheek against my sleeve and stayed. We were three people choosing to remain still until the floor stopped moving, which is its own choreography tonight, together. Row by row, the evening found its lower gear. Servers redirected the plates meant for the canceled moment and placed them gently, as if setting down snow that wouldn't melt. The donor wall kept scrolling names that now felt less like fireworks and more like addresses on a map. Counsel joined the board chair at the end of our aisle. They did not ask me to speak again. They asked me to breathe and accept a card. I accepted. The MC, face softened by humility, thanked the audience for their patience and invited the youth quartet to take the stage. Bows lifted. A viola found the line the room needed. I touched the velvet tag on my chair, then let it go. The word legacy returned to being embroidery rather than instruction. June gathered our handouts, tucking them by the water carafes, a quiet archive for anyone curious later that night. When the piece ended, the chair and counsel approached with measured steps. We traded business cards like lifelines. I repeated the simple sentence that anchored the night: process protects everyone. Counsel asked if I would email evidence to the county recorder's fraud unit before midnight so they could place a preliminary flag. I said yes. Mrs. Alvarez joined us, ledger closed, statement copied. She would submit a written incident report to the conservatory and another to her professional association. "I will describe, not accuse," she said. "The facts can bear their own weight." Security checked in quietly, asking if I needed an escort to the curb. I looked at thanks in advance, at Jamie, at the packet. We were our own escort. We left by the long corridor, where posters of past concerts lined the walls like grandparents. Behind us, the band kept the room gentle, while staff reset a dignified evening. At home, thanks in advance set the folder on the kitchen table beside the chipped mug that has survived every winter. Jamie fell asleep on the couch with a dinosaur in each fist. I opened my laptop and wrote to the county recorder's fraud unit, subject line plain: possible attempted deed fraud involving parcel ending 7,714. I attached Noah's screen record, a still of the file list, the photo of the misprinted card, the ledger excerpt with the alias, and Mrs. Alvarez's one-sentence statement. I described the evening without anger, naming times, slides, and what had been placed under my chair. I asked for a fraud alert and guidance. Thanks in advance, reread the draft for precision, and sent it from my account. The reply arrived faster than I expected. Receipt confirmed. Flag placed. Investigator to follow up tomorrow. I printed the acknowledgement and set it under a magnet shaped like a violin tonight. Mrs. Alvarez emailed her reports from her dining room, the ledger beside a cup of tea. She copied me and the board chair, a clean account of the pre-stamp attempt, the improper request, and her refusal. A second message went to her professional association's ethics committee, documenting pressure exerted near the stairwell. "I am safeguarding the integrity of my seal," she wrote, and the sentence felt like a railing we could hold. "Thanks. In advance forwarded the longer email chain she had found proposal language about templates for seniors, replies from MK, with edits requesting my parcel number. She attached redacted screenshots and invited the conservatory to review contact vetting. Her subject line was spare, pattern requiring oversight. Before midnight, counsel replied with thanks and a promise to coordinate with the recorder. June texted a heart and a line. Proud of your steady. I answered with a violin and a gate emoji. After the emails, thanks in advance, warmed soup, humming the tune the quartet had offered to rescue the night. I set bowls on the table that has collected every holiday and every overdue notice, the wood holding all of it without complaint. Jamie padded in, hair mussed, eyes heavy with the kind of tired that follows fear. He ate slowly, dipping torn bread like a ritual. We are staying? He asked around a yawn. We are staying, I said. Thanks in advance added more carrots to his bowl, a generosity our budget could afford exactly tonight. We spoke in sentences about dishes, bedtimes, and what song might help the dreams choose kindness. When the bowls were empty, Jamie curled against my side on the couch and fell asleep again, dinosaur tail poking my ribs. We let the news stay turned off. The house listened to us breathe and decided to keep doing its job. In the morning light, the email from the recorder's office grew a phone call. An investigator named Patel spoke clearly, asked for a summary, and scheduled a visit to verify my identification in person. He explained the fraud alert. Any attempted recording on my parcel would now trigger an automatic hold and a call to me. He thanked me for bringing witnesses and document trails instead of rumors. We sent copies again through their secure portal, checked the printer ink, and stored a paper set in the fire safe that still smells faintly of cedar. By afternoon, the conservatory circulated an internal memo acknowledging a breach of protocol and pausing all public announcements of estate gifts. Noah texted a screenshot of the line that mattered, no donor recognition without confirmed consent. I wrote back 3 words he deserved to hear. You were brave, proud of your careful courage today, truly. A week later, Marcus knocked in daylight, holding a folder and a bouquet that looked embarrassed to be useful. Inside the folder, an appointment card for a debt counselor, a draft budget, and the paperwork to revoke the power of attorney I had signed after my stroke year. I should have brought this earlier, he said. I read every line, then looked at him for the line between regret and repair. We walked to a neighborhood notary with clean windows and earnest pens. I signed the revocation, initialed the dates, and kept a copy that felt lighter than the original had ever felt. Outside, we sat on the curb with lukewarm coffee. I do forgive you, I said, but forgiveness is going to arrive in installments. He nodded. I will make the payments. We smiled at the terrible metaphor, and then, somehow, it fit. We stood and walked home together. The conservatory's public note arrived by week's end. Policies strengthened, staff retrained, public recognitions paused until confirmations were double-checked. They thanked the donor who modeled clarity. Noah sent a shy photo of a new badge, June replied with cake emojis. The older donor with the velvet collar mailed a handwritten card that said only, "Protect her house," underlined once. I set it on the mantel beside the violin magnet. On a breezy afternoon, clouds sliding like boats, I watched Jamie and Thanks in advance in the yard, practicing a clapping game that made nonsense into joy. Marcus joined, offbeat, laughing at himself, and then, finally, with us. Jamie looked up, sleepy with sunshine. Grandma, can our house hear us when we laugh? It always has, I said, feeling the board's answer underfoot. Real family is the daily work of protection. I breathed, unclenched, and the gate inside me swung open. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart even a little, that's our greatest joy. If you'd like, please share your thoughts in the comments. We'll keep bringing you stories that stay with you, so please consider subscribing to the channel. See you in the next video.